Pet Sematary is a 1989 horror film written by Stephen King and directed by Mary Lambert. After tragedy strikes, a grieving father discovers an ancient burial ground behind his home with the power to raise the dead. If you've seen my review for the Stephen King It miniseries, you'll know how I was introduced to the story, but unlike with Pennywise, Pet Sematary never really landed on my radar when it came to that specific music video with the Marilyn Manson "This Is Halloween" song. It was never like something that looked interesting to me. I was always more interested in the clown, but I got around to watching the film a few years ago and I rewatched it the other day, and overall my thoughts on this original film is that I think it is a completely underrated horror film that, while admittedly not perfect, I think is given a lot of unnecessary shit at times, because I found it to be really unsettling, pretty scary, and really emotional with the family aspect that is the center focus of this film. This movie focuses a lot on grief and death. It showcases how death is an inevitable thing and how people need to accept that, and you can't cheat it or escape from it. And this movie deals with the consequences of trying to cheat and escape death when you are dealt with a very tragic situation like this family in the movie did. And it's really sad to see them go through this, but you don't want them to make decisions that they would eventually make, even though you understand why, in an emotional sense, they will make the decisions later on. And I think this is all helped with great performances from the actors playing these characters. Most specifically, Dale Midkiff and Fred Gwynne. These two actors are marvelous on screen and do a great job portraying these characters that they inhabit. I think that they all give a sense of gravitas and realism to the film that makes these characters feel realistic. You understand who they are, and they just felt human. They don't feel like just movie characters just for the sake of it. Their performances felt real, they felt raw, and you really latched onto them real quickly once they arrive on screen. And I really like how the family aspect of the film was built up from the beginning to how we explore in the first half of the film just how happy this family really is and how good their life is. Even though slowly, as they start to move into their house, they immediately start to see some weird stuff going on. At least the father does. That he cannot explain to his family, which leads him to a lot of discussions about death and the inevitability of it, and how he's trying to talk to his children when they ask him questions like that. And then when we get to the eventual tragedy that caps off the second act, I think that is where the film starts to get a bit more horrifying. We get a few suspenseful stories and images here, especially one with the mother character talking about her past with her family and how a relationship with her sister deeply affected her mentally and emotionally. It was a really horrifying flashback, and the practical effects there to create this really anorexic character that just looked like she was literally deteriorating and becoming a mummy of sorts. It was just creepy as heck. I really enjoyed this aspect of the film and how it's able to explore a lot of these dark themes and elements. But when we get to the third act, we get all that paid off in some really horrifying and emotional ways. And I think how the third act was able to cap everything off, especially with the little boy character, I think was both unsettling and tragic. This movie felt more like a tragedy instead of a horror film. Definitely horrifying elements, creepy enough for the Halloween season. But I view this movie less as a horror film and more of a tragedy and a cautionary tale in how you can never escape death. It's always going to come to you no matter what. There's no way around it. And you just need to accept it. Otherwise, you'd be stuck in a sense of limbo and your mind would deteriorate and you just lose yourself. You lose your sanity. You lose very much a part of you that's supposed to be human to you. And I think the ending to this film really drove that message home really well. If I were to have any problems, I would say that there are some special effects that do look a bit dated, though I don't really hold that against a lot of older films because they were made in a different time where they did the best that they could with the budget and the technology that they had. So with what this movie was able to do, I think it did a lot of its effects pretty well, even if it is not perfect at times, because at times it can look a bit dated. Also, there's some aspects to the child performances where, especially with the little girl, it's not always the most convincing, and you can tell that's just a child just acting her lines, and it's not really the most convincing way of giving this dialogue. And I will admit there are some scenes in the beginning of the film where it did felt a little bit too overly whimsical. It felt like it was almost near like a Disney movie kind of performance, and I just felt like it was a bit too over the top of the way the family is introduced. Even though I liked how we are starting with a really happy family that love their home, it felt a little too happy and too much like a performance, sort of like a stage play of sorts, if you understand what I'm saying. It just felt a little too fake with the way this family is introduced to us. But apart from those few nitpicks, I virtually have no other problems with this film. I found it to be unsettling, really creepy. The drama and emotional side to the film, I think, was really well done, and the characters and actors are all really stellar throughout the board. The pacing and the directing was great. The writing from Stephen King and how he adapted his book to a movie script, I think translated very well. Mary Lambert's directing, I think, was really stellar, especially in a lot of the horror scenes. It really got under my skin, and it never felt too grotesque in an unnecessary way. With a story like this, you could lose yourself with the graphic gore and imagery, but there was just the right amount of it for you to be disgusted, but for you to still understand and latch onto the story in an emotional sense and getting invested into the characters. It never felt out of place. Everything just felt perfect. Overall, I found Pet Sematary to be a great horror film. I think it is severely underrated and overlooked, and I think a lot more people should really give it a bit more credit. I think it is a great horror film, and you should definitely check it out this time during the Halloween season. I'm going to give Pet Sematary an A. Thank you guys so much for watching. Please leave a like, subscribe, comment, and I will see you guys next time.